the way you
When you say it, I feel privileged to leave. When I say it, I feel like it's been an affront to me. I feel like I've been asked to leave. When you say it, it's like an exit.
It's funny because in English like the intonation matters, and I've been saying a word. It's like a word for a long time. You have a new. So I've been saying success. Right? And instead of saying success, I say success. It sounds like sixes. So somebody at some point told me, "No, you got to get your intonation right. Man. This is not good." I think we have to stop somewhere. So we cannot just wait for questions. They won't come until something is said. So you're going to start to say,
I'd rather him go on and give his message. Is he here?
not yet.
Not yet.
I don't have anything to say really. I think the only thing, to be honest with
I
you,
think you should leave with a message. In other words, make comments based on what you heard tonight. And then we go with that. And that's what he would do. He would lead with this message.
I don't know. I think he would ask us to start with what we have to say, I think. I mean, is there anything that you feel comfortable saying at the outset, or do you feel comfortable saying at the outset that would go along with the message and what we're trying to say tonight?
He's right here.
Yeah, I really feel that he's got it right. Because the influence, the impact of this moment must be done. With me, it's gonna be professional. With him, it's the head of the institution.
That was good. But also, what he said that had to be said was good.
Yes.
What do you think?
Right?
Way faster.
Okay, good.
Thank you for the message.
Was that good?
Yeah.
That was probably on that topic the best I've ever heard. And I'm not flattering, I'm being honest. It was
That's
I
a tough
got
thing
this.
to do, really.
Huh?
That's a tough thing to do. But,
Yeah.
what
Night and this is a really big issue in a way, like what we want to talk about tonight, and just pray for this to be edifying and hopefully understood in the right way. Relates to the message. Maybe some of the things said in the message tonight will help us in our discussion. I really want everybody here to feel that they have the freedom to talk about what is on their hearts. And we talked a little earlier today about having a wrap on the subject of racism, and wanted Pastor Ronaldo and also Julius to be able to share from their hearts to help us understand a little bit more, and also the spiritual life, which is the key, which these men know and walk in, and we really have a multi-ethnic church assembly, and haven't in our assembly amongst us. I never feel I don't feel racism or think it in my own life. I don't think it, and then amongst the body, I don't feel it. We have body life, Doesn't mean that it couldn't be here, but what we want to talk about maybe is how people maybe don't have body life, don't have a spiritual life, don't have the understanding that we talked about tonight, and they judge by the exterior things, and maybe some of those experiences and some of those things that we could talk about tonight. So we have the iPad with the opportunity for viewers to send in a question or comment. We may not address it, but you can send it in, and we can start it off. So let's go. Amen. Who wants to go first, Pastor Ronaldo?
It's been an interesting 120 days. Our focus was a lot about a virus that we couldn't see, but hurt a lot of people. And then on the heels of that, many of us woke up to violence based on some things that we couldn't see. And I like what you said tonight about value, because underneath all of that is value is the issue, the big issue. Jonathan connected with David because Jonathan saw value in David. Saul didn't connect with David because he didn't find value in David. I think the difference is the heart of racism. I find difference in someone who's not like me, and I remove value from them because they're not like me. I think this issue is like an onion. I think there's layers here. I don't think it's as simple as policing. Many issues of racism have nothing to do with the police. The 3 cases that are polarized in the last 2 or 3 weeks, only one directly involved police. 2 other issues, there were no police involved at all. And I found in my research that many of the issues of police brutality are committed by policemen of color or policemen that have a Latino background that are not white. I have an uncle who's a policeman, he was a policeman for many years. And he said to me one time that there are good cops, there's bad cops, but it's all policing. I don't think you can blame police for racism. I think you can blame racism for maybe the way some police act. I think the deeper issue is racism. I think the extension of that is the behavior people have towards each other. I think when you peel back the layers, you find a court system that has an uneven balance or judgment towards how it treats people of color. Why colored black men, for instance, make up roughly black people make up 13% of this nation's population, but the prison population of black men is 37%. That's disproportionately unusual. That's not accidental. That's systematized. I think it's deeper than that. I think a lot of the violence that is happening and frustration that people have is not based primarily on the death of one man, but the pervasive system that operates underneath of that. And that there are many, many men whose names do not fit on CNN, who do not fit on Time Magazine, who people are not yelling their name and making posters for, who are victimized every day. Some of us know what it's like to be coached by older black people on how to act when you get a police stop. What should you do with your hands? Where should you sit? You may not be able to identify with that. How to carry yourself in certain situations so you don't fit the description. And sometimes, no matter what you do fit the description. So to grow up in an environment like that, it produces a fear. Martin Luther King Jr. said this, interesting, it's a bit crude statement at the time, but he said, the white man for the black man is fear. The black man for the white man is guilt. Now, the cross deals with both of that, but those things are pervasive. underneath our court system, they're underneath our police system, they're underneath social perceptions, they're underneath educational systems. They're underneath how we see people, how we perceive people. I don't think it's as simplistic as I hate black people, because who says that? We assume racism is some of my best friends are black. We assume racism is, I'm not a racist, I like black people. I don't put racism on an individual. I put racism on an established culture within our country that affects black people of color in a variety of areas in life, that they feel as though they don't have a leg up, and there's things that prove it. A black man is 5 times more likely to be incarcerated than a white person charged with the same crime, statistically. That's a true fact. That's not hyperbole. That's not a burnout building. The sad thing is many folks feel that the voice for that frustration is rage. It's pent-up rage, reacting out of frustration. And like Pastor Schouder said, it's very interesting. He said there's no capacity for the spirit. Because when I'm in my natural carnal state, that's how I respond. I just react. I emote. I liked what he said tonight. He said, America's wounded. First we got sick, and now we're wounded. We need healing. Maybe this is a turning point in our nation where, because we've been physically sick and emotionally wounded, that as a nation we can look to God for answers. I find it's interesting, in the 60s, politics were rarely talked about in church, but race was talked about almost every Sunday. And now in today's church, politics is talked about a lot and race is never discussed because nobody wants to talk about the R word. But politics, we can make jokes and make innuendos politically, and we can talk about that. But when it comes to race, nobody wants to talk about that. No one wants to attack that subject. It's uncomfortable. It makes me feel fearful. It makes me feel guilty. But as a Christian, I've been in places where I've seen women clutch their purse and move it away from me. I've had things said to me in the history of the church, in my history in the church, in churches, that are racist. You don't survive a ministry without thick skin. But I think it's this culture underneath, this perception that someone that doesn't look like me is inferior to me, I think has been strengthened, has been taught, has been learned, and been accepted. So then as a black man in this country, you tolerate that until you don't tolerate it anymore. And when one person beside you decides not to tolerate it, you agree not to tolerate it too. I don't agree with their method, but I understand their message. They're angry and they're hurt. What's disturbing to me about what's happening is that in the civil rights movement, the church was the mouthpiece for social injustice. The church is not the mouthpiece for social injustice today. When the church was the mouthpiece, we led with the principle and we followed with passion. Today, we lead with passion and then we try to follow up with principle, but you're yelling so loud I can't hear you. Your passion is so loud. You can't talk to me through a burnt-out store. You can't talk to me with a looted TV. You can't talk to me with that. Martin Luther King Jr. said that the means that we use must be as pure as the ends that we seek to achieve. So sadly, it becomes this recyclable thing. In 2015, it was Freddie Gregg. Then until the next big event, we recycle, we react, and we recycle, we react, and we recycle, and there's no change because our method hasn't changed. It's all passion and no principle. And we can finger police, and we can finger this situation. Is it unjust? Yes. Is it unfair? Yes. But where are we going? And I believe that without a change that's systemic in the hearts of people, we end up right back here again, and probably worse. It escalates because frustration always escalates. I've been talking to pastors around Baltimore, And I said to one pastor at a certain church, I said, the churches have nothing to say. And he said to me, the civil rights movement was born in the church. The Black Lives Movement was born in the street. And I thought about that. God is not a part of that message. So the message is moral but not spiritual. He's not part of it. So the churches feel like they're not even involved in this movement. That's why you don't see any pastors, for instance, at any of the protests anywhere. Not many. Hardly any at all. They're still deciding how to get involved in a fight that's already started. I feel, on the one hand, the church used to be the voice of social reason. We are no longer. I find that when it comes politically, we have a lot to say about who should be president. But on other issues, our mouth is quiet. The issue of race, our mouth is quiet. Even in the history of our church, there's not a lot of messages that we've touched the subject of race. Today was, in my opinion, in my own opinion, the greatest message on race I've heard in this church since I've been in this church. He addressed it. He said something. I feel the church cannot be quiet. The church cannot be quiet. I don't think the church is the answer to racism, but I think the church is good. It cannot be quiet about it. Christ spoke about racism. He dealt with racism. Paul dealt with it in Galatians chapter 2. He was not quiet about it. This is not a flu that goes away. This is a culture. It's a learned culture. I'll cede my time with this. I think the church can be involved in the conversation. I think, first of all, what can the church do? Number one, we can pray. It's amazing what we can pray for a new president, or a change in government, but we can't pray about racism. We can pray corporately, we can pray specifically, and we can pray systematically about it. It's amazing that you only pray for things that you believe are a problem. If you don't believe it's a problem, you don't pray about it. We can pray. I think number two, we can talk about it. We can preach. It can be in our pulpits, and we can talk about it. I celebrate Pastor Schaller in that. In Grace Hour, he spoke about it. Tonight in the pulpit, he spoke about it. And to be frankly honest with you, this rap was his idea. So I applaud his courage. Many men would not do that. If I can be racial for a moment, many white pastors would not do that. A pastor of a predominantly white church says, we're going to talk about race. And I know you're going to feel uncomfortable, but I'm going to use the Bible. I'm going to be spiritual about it. I'm going to say something. So number two, we can preach about it. Number three, we can participate. If things are happening that address it socially, we can participate on some level. We can get involved. We can't just close our eyes and walk away from it. Because the people that we minister to are going through these situations. We can, Ezekiel 3:14, we can sit where they sit, and we can minister to them. And then number four, we can promote dialogue. Because underneath the racism, there is a mindset, a wrong mindset. I had a guy one time in the church say to me, I thought all black people, had criminal records. And you laugh. But he was sincere. He was raised that way. He was raised that blacks are criminalized. Do you know that 1 out of every 1,000 black men in this country will be killed by a police officer, statistically? He was raised to think that black men are a certain way. That racism breeds a bias, it breeds a prejudice. Nothing that is visual, but it's like in 1964, the Supreme Court ruling was talking about what is pornography. And the judge couldn't describe it, but he says, I know it when I see it. It's the same thing with racism. I know it when I see it. You know it when you see it. You know it when you feel it, when you grow up with it. At some point, you begin to believe it's tolerable, it's acceptable, it's just the way it is. And then in some ways, you actually embrace it and say, well, maybe we are inferior because we're different. Which is why a lot of times you don't see white churches that fellowship with black churches. Baltimore specifically is white and black when it comes to churches. A good friend of mine at a white Baptist church told me directly, he said, Pastor Ronaldo, they're never going to meet. It's the history of Maryland. I said to him, I won't say his name, but I said to him, that's choice. That's learned preference. And that's not God. You can't raise your hands to God and say yes. Isn't it interesting in Galatians chapter 3, verse 28, that the first thing that Paul mentions about equality is race? He goes straight to race first. Because he understands that's going to be the biggest issue. Was that not the issue with the Greek-speaking and the Jewish-speaking widows? Wasn't that not the issue in Peter's life with Gentiles? And I'm well aware that personal perception of me may change after tonight, and I'm okay with that. I love this church, and this is my church. But what's true is true. But I like what Pastor Sauer said tonight about value. No matter what the color of somebody's skin is, when you find value in them, there's no space for racism. And only the Spirit can give you the correct value. The answer for racism is obviously the gospel, is obviously Christ. But Christianity Today said this: preaching against racism is not a distraction from the gospel. So just because we talk about racism doesn't mean that we're not purveyors of the gospel and we're not pursuing the harvest. But I want to address social issues of the day. Christ did, and so did Paul. So I'm not going to bury my head in the sand and pretend like it's going to go away, because it's not. Until it's addressed, it won't. And there's people in 40 cities protesting because of that reason. That's my comments.
Yeah, so, oh wow. So, thank you for that, Pastor Ronaldo. That was a lot there. So the thought, for me, on platforms like Facebook or Instagram, I'm pretty quiet on these things, and, I have thoughts and ideas that sometimes, being human, I think there's a possibility for us to be not understood, to be misunderstood. This is like common in even Christ, like he was, in the New Testament, there's times when he's, completely misunderstood. But his example is like Christ goes right to the heart of the matter, like literally every time. I think when it comes to race, it's a hard issue. And I feel that it's the only way that it's dealt with, is through the heart, people need hope, and this is one thing that, I've seen through these protests. When it comes to our world and our culture, it's leaving people miserable and without hope. Constantly, for 60 or 70 years in our country, we are told that God is nonsense. Marriage doesn't work. This country is evil. Your future is bleak. There's no hope for you. But really, I think, the place that we are in our country is the product of that constant message of no hope and no, meaning. And I just think that, we are blessed to have this church in Christ that, gives us meaning. My experience just, being a boy, I was about 12 or so, and I remember my mom sitting me down, like, being 12, like you're almost a teenager, and she could just sense that, like, like I'm going out more and I'm doing things, and, she sat me down and explained to me how to interact, with the cops, like you do what they ask you to do. Like that was, the bottom line. And her reasoning and her thinking was because, my son and his life is more important than something that could be unjust. There's nothing that happens on this earth that God will leave unchecked. You know what I mean? And for me, that just helped me, that there's, someone, greater that fights for me too. You know what I mean? But in this whole thing, like I've been challenged to speak out, like about this, yeah, there's just a lot to be said, and I would say when it comes to Christ and us as a church, like this is something that we can absolutely talk about, as a leader, like all of us here are, leaders in the church. That there's certain people that like you talk to about certain topics, like sometimes you're not quite sure if the relationship you have with this person can bear like a certain topic, but as in this church, we're blessed with, being taught the word, and we have a relationship with Christ. And is there a topic that is off limits for Christ? No. So this is something that I'm, actually glad that we're talking about. I don't personally agree with everything that's out there about it. My heart hurts for Black people. My heart hurts for our country, and I want to see is there a way to go forward and to be one? You know what I mean? We can spend a lot of time talking about our past in this country, and I'm actually happy to talk about it, but just going forward, I think we have the answer, and that's Christ, so. Any questions online? None, really?
We have a few comments. Just thank you for what you said a few times, so people appreciate your portion at this point. And like what you said, Julius, there is hope, and so the hope, the word hope comes a lot, into the comments. So that's pretty important.
And I have to say, I feel like there is, people who want to leave us, torn apart in our country. There's voices for sure who wants to keep us, not one really, And I would say it's just not of God, And again, it's a hard issue. It's a hard issue, and I think it's how God actually deals with us is actually one-on-one. Yeah. Yeah.
Like 1 Samuel 16:7, he doesn't look on the outward, but he looks on the heart. So, my experience is that I have so much fun a lot of joy with my brothers and my sisters, and I also see their gifts. I see their commitment, dedication, humility. I see a lot of, I see Christ in people, and that's maybe also I want to see that. I want to see that because that's like what Philemon says in 1 Corinthians 13. We don't think evil. We think of the potential. You think of the blessing. You think of what is God doing. You think of my brother, I just see a lot of people in Baltimore City are believers. A lot of believers. You meet them on the street. They are believers. I go to Sam's Club on an outreach. 9 out of 10 people I meet there, are black folks that are believers, and they really are. They really are. So, this event that happened in Minneapolis is an indicator, and also there's been a sequence of these events that have led us to this place, and to make the statement. And I would just like to know, in your lives, to tell us, you have already, but also to help us understand that, there are times when that is a very real thing, that you feel, whatever it is that you feel, and you just overcome it by Christ. You overcome it by your identity, your new identity, or a spiritual mind. So, feel. Let me illustrate it this way. We have a man in the church. He's new. He's sitting here. He's here for 1 year, 2 years, and then he just gets overwhelmed with the idea, I don't belong here. These are not my people. I need to be in a black church, or I don't belong here. Though these people are, they're different, or I just feel something. And what is that, and how do you overcome that? Or has that ever happened to you?
We're a predominantly white church. Most of our black population is not African American, they're African. We have maybe between 200 and 300, depending on who you count, Africans in this church, which is a huge percentage of this church.
No, could I interrupt you just for a second? They are Africans, so do they have some kind, how do they process it, being with here, How do they process that?
The ones that I talk to, because they don't have our history here, they don't have the black American racial history, their position's a little different. In many cases, it's not as bad, to be frankly honest with you, because they don't have that perception. I would also say theirs is more connected to being a foreigner in a foreign country. So they would feel out of place anywhere that's not their home country. What's unique about African Americans is this is our country. So we're made to feel inferior systemically in our own country, which is far different than being a foreigner. Like, I'm an American, but if I go to another country, I understand a measure of xenophobia or whatever because I'm a foreigner in a foreign country, but an African American was born and raised here generationally, 10, 12, 14 generations. They came over on a boat like a lot of folks came over on a boat. So in their mind, what did Martin Luther King say? He said, we all came on different ships, but we're all in the same boat now. We're here. So somehow we're all in the same boat now. We're not all in the same boat. We're not all on the same level in the boat. I would say some of the newer folks, truthfully, transparently, when there's a new black person in this church, I gravitate to them because I don't want them to feel isolated. I don't want them to feel insecure. Just plain, 2 Corinthians 5:7, we live by faith and not by sight. But the reality is we make a lot of judgments by sight. We soul win by sight. That guy looks like a very dangerous person. I'm not going to go talk to them about God. Or, I love the challenge, I'm going to go talk to them about God because they look dangerous. So sight plays a big part in decisions that I make. Whether it's a practice or a lifestyle, I'm guided that way.
Can I interrupt you just for a second? Because to process this, we can go a little slow. Okay, so to the white folks that are here in the room, have you ever been in a public place, where you felt somehow with other white folks, inferior, or have you ever felt you didn't belong there? Were you ever in a room with other folks, but you felt like, I don't know, I feel insecure. I feel I don't belong here. Has that ever happened to you? And maybe, if you're not a good student in school, but you go to the Johns Hopkins University and you're sitting there, somewhere, and you see all these very bright people and all these people there, and you just feel like, wow, I definitely don't belong here, These are not my, this isn't where I belong. So you have to deal with the insecurity, whatever it might be. Let's say with a woman, maybe it's what they look like they're not, compared to others, so we all know this feeling. So I'm asking, because we're a white church and we don't, we're not, if we're spiritually minded, we know how, let's say, I'm a white man in Africa and I'm a white man there. Do I feel, what do I feel, or how do I process that? I don't know. It's maybe, I'm just trying to help us understand what we're talking about, because I feel it's a real thing.
I was going to say, this is what, again, it's a mindset and it's unspoken. But go back to the 1964 application. You know it when you see it. Like someone black comes in the church. So someone white, rather than try to invest in that black person, they take that black person over to the black person that they know, or the white person who deals with a lot of black people. Because that's who you talk to, because when you're black, you talk to that person. That's racism. That's not me connecting you to another black person. We're 1,100 people. But rather than me trying to disciple you or invest in you, no. You should be talking to Julius because he's black like you. That's racism. That's making a value judgment on the basis of how you look and saying that you're automatically disqualified from being invested in by me because you're not like me.
Yeah.
Or
I agree. I don't do that.
no, you don't.
I don't even think about it. I honestly don't. But I'm not here to defend myself. I'm to learn from you. I am learning from you. I am hearing what you're saying, That's true. If that's the case, because there could be, by the way, this is a very difficult subject to talk about from us, I think. We're doing a good job. But for those that are watching, I don't know what's going on in their minds. But you have to trust us because we have it's very good to have a very open talk about it. Okay, Julius.
So just a thought, I came here, I was young, so it's, different. I was about 10 years old, and, each and every place I would go, I would find myself just being the only black person. And, the question comes to you, do people understand me? And that's not even just a race thing, my skin color. It's being black comes with a who you are with the culture of being black, and it's great, and I can't say that, I was, mistreated here, but being alone is it's hard, you know what I mean? And, back to my first point, it's like each person has a need to be like understood, and the way, like the only way I could overcome that feeling was that, God completely understood me. Like He made me. I love who I am. I'm like black, and I love it. These are the things that were reinforced, through Christ, and also being around people who just love me. So it's very it's hard to especially as a kid, and just feeling in the room that someone doesn't understand you, but to know that it doesn't sum up like who I am as a person. You know what I mean? Like, of course I can spend all my days focusing on that hurt, and completely miss the point. So yeah, it's just I am fearfully, made by God, and I'm I am, and just to find that love that God has for you, like you have for yourself, So that's something that I really learned, because being 10 years old, I came to the school, and I thought, I'm just not going to make it here. Mom, what are you doing? I need help. These people aren't like me. You know what I mean? But it's if you just live in that mode, you won't survive. And, it's just, actually knowing that God is the answer, to that meeting. Who am I at my core? Well, I am, Julius, God made you, and He has a purpose, for your life, and that doesn't mean that we can't have compassion towards people who haven't been actually raised that way. You know what I mean? There's people who don't know who they are in Christ, and that are mistreated, and it's important for me as a black man to stand with those people too. You know what I mean? And saying, that there's something greater than what this person may think of you. You know what I mean? Though it can be so painful in the moment, it's there has to be an answer to it,
It's amazing. That's a great lesson. I feel the insecurity. I don't belong here. Maybe these are not my people. But then God, you just start to trust God, and you realize that actually, this is my family. I'm hearing from the Lord. I'm being loved. I'm learning to love, and I'm growing in my faith. And you were 10 years old, and now how old are you? No, 31. So I've got to do the math on that. Okay, so so Pastor Ronaldo, you want to say something about dealing with the insecurity? This is a spiritual thing, but I want to also say, not to minimize the value of what we are talking about, but I want to say that all of us human beings have this challenge of dealing with our insecurities, or at the other end of it, our pride. If there's pride, then God is saying. So, but many people don't walk with God, so they don't know how to handle the insecurity.
I feel that what happened with Julius, sadly, is rare and not common in the African American community in a church like ours, which is why at least 50% of our new visitors are black, but very few stay. And we could say, well, they didn't get baked in the loaf. I'll give you that. You could say that they didn't find God. I'll give you that. But if our heart is to minister, maybe we didn't minister. I don't know. I don't want to indict us. I'm just saying, in a big church, when you're a minority, you look on the pulpit, you don't see virtually any black leadership. You look in a lot of positions of responsibility, you don't see a lot of black faces. So in every position of authority and security, you don't see much color. So you don't feel secure, and you have very few quote-unquote role models to look to. So you stand around and look, and you're like, okay, where is a place for me? Can I do what they do? And I would say, biblically, yes. Spiritually, yes. But on first perception, in those first 7 weeks, I'm looking at everything. And I'm saying, okay, there's no room for me on the stage. There's no room for me really in the audience. Okay. So they don't. And there's no simple answer for that, Pastor Schaller. But I would say a lot of times people are not overtly racist, but they do prejudicial things. They make comments, they do things that are racist. Just blatant racist, and it's ha ha ha, but the person is like, what? It's the flesh, it's off, but whatever. But when it's systematic and when it's accepted by a large group of people, it becomes a culture. It's allowed to exist. And in the Baptists were talking about this 10 years ago. There's a gigantic divide in their denomination based upon color. And they don't deal with it. They can't deal with it. They've had entire conventions on that topic and come away with nothing. Because if I have a preconceived bias in my heart about how I see a certain group of people, I'm going to act and think a certain way. I remember I came on property 13 years ago, and I walked up, and someone walked up to me and said, "Excuse me, can I help you?" I said, "Yeah, I'm going in here." "Where are you going?" "Who said you could go there?" And I said, "God said I can go there. This is my church." "Oh, okay. Just wanted to know where you were going." And I said to the person, "Do you ask everybody that question and want to know where they're going?" He said, "No, just you." I said, "Okay, thank you. Clear that up for me." And that's an isolated incident, but that kind of stuff happens in the church. Racism is the taboo that churches don't talk about, but it exists in the church because there's very few messages on it. We don't address it. It just kind of happens, and we kind of have the get over it mentality. Just go to the cross and get over it. In other words, what they're saying indirectly is, I'm going to stay the way I am, and you need to grow. I don't know if that's a valid response. We're a predominantly white church in a predominantly black city. That's the demographic. So something's got to give. If we want our church to grow, something's got to give. Maybe that's a cold word, but that's the reality. How do we reach people? And in some respects, I said, okay, maybe to a certain level, there's individual accountability. I search my own heart. Am I different with black people than I am with white people about how I perceive what they do and how they are? Do I treat them differently? And maybe unconsciously, I don't even see it. I don't even see it. This is just the way I am. I've always been this way. I've always thought that. I'll just say that it's real. And I don't think you can spiritualize it away and just say that it doesn't exist, that it's not ripping our country apart right now. And the sad reality is, because of the voices that are speaking, they have very little principle and a whole lot of passion. And that comes to nothing. So unless we change the approach, unless there's dialogue, it's real talk with people that matter, from a low level to a high level, we're going to be right back here again. Something else, someone else is going to, they put body cams on policemen that didn't change anything. The laws are still the same. Judges still rule the way they rule. The earth is still the earth. And I don't know if the church can change that. Obviously, Christ can change that. But I would love, my prayer is that the church would be part of the conversation again. Get back and be involved in the conversation in our church and in the world. Have a voice about it. But that's such a hot button topic. I can tell you right now, I can't name a lot of pastors that have the courage that Pastor Schaller had tonight to address it to a predominantly white church. Are you kidding me? Please. I have more respect for him today than I've ever had in my entire life. To touch that subject in this church, the way he did tonight, this should go up there with baked in the loaf as a hallmark. But it won't. But it should. Pastor Shabeli has something to say, and I'd love to hear it. I would apply that same 1964 ruling, and I would say, love too, you know it when you see it. You can't fake that, And I think that in our church, there are people that genuinely love, and you know it when you see it. I personally don't believe we're a racial church. We're a racist church at all. We're nowhere near it. I think there's some folks that were raised a certain way because of exposure. So maybe they don't know how to act with someone of color. But I wouldn't call them blatant racists. We've had some. I think in a group this large, statistically, you're going to have that. But this is my church. I think God allows moments like this for us to take a beat, hear His voice, and learn how to minister in a new way.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say, the point that, like I made earlier about, this topic, it's possible to be deeply caring about this race issue in our country and also, like, see what God has to say about it as well. I think, like, a lot of times in our country, we can think of, like, either or, McDonald's or Burger King or Coke or Pepsi. Like, you have to always pick a side, but and and that's true. But if you just think about Christ and what side that He picked, He just completely operated it in a different realm. It's possible. Really, it's possible to seek a solution and also care for people who just have no hope, and don't see like an end that's near. And I'll be honest, like, I don't know the answer to it really. I have my own thoughts about it, but really, like, there's not just one person that can fix this thing. There's just not on earth, and my last thought about it, I'm just thinking about, like, God and how he actually, like, gets our hearts. He could do it by force. He could tell us that, like, you have a problem, like, nail it into our heads, like, you are the problem, you are a problem. Though that might get my confession, that will not get my heart. So that's the issue. He's not doing it by force. So like, I guess that's the thought that I had, is like, God is in the business of speaking and changing the hearts of men, and that's it really.
If you take 1,000 people and you teach them Christ and they learn love, and then we teach our children and our grandchildren, like in my family, my children, and then as my grandchildren grow up, and you multiply that, that's 10,000 people maybe. That 10,000 people who aren't even thinking in any other way but the mind of Christ regarding people that are in the church, And if you multiplied that around, that's a big influence, But the other message is also very loud, and it's heard, and it's on all kinds of people saying terrible things about people, And that's in our country too, You could say they're false prophets, and right, and that's So you have the devil's work and you have God's work, right? Regarding our church, like, we are a predominantly white church, but the people that come here are from the zip codes are basically Essex, Middle River, Parkville, Kearney. So it's not really in the city. Geographically, we're in the city, but we don't have the attraction to the city folks, There's like the Beltway folks in 95, And there's a reason. But I would say that years ago, we said, why don't we plant churches in the city of Baltimore? Remember, Pastor, was it Monroe?
Yeah, West Baltimore.
Yeah.
There was a vision for that, to have a church in the city, because we were not attracting city people in our church.
Yeah.
But underneath that, why not a church that's in the city is not attracting people from the city? That's the deeper question that I'm going at.
Yeah.
And I would
And
say
yeah,
that's the whole.
that's your point. Yeah.
That's my point exactly.
Yeah, we have buses that go, we have a couple routes. I mean, we have had, but we have only, 10 people. There used to be more. Remember when Pastor Stevens
Yes.
was here? We'd have a couple buses and maybe 50 people from the city coming in, Yeah. Yeah, go ahead, Pastor.
There are a lot of commentaries, too many to reference, I think, but a lot of encouragement about to having the conversations, and maybe one I think is interesting because it's related to what you said, Julius, a little while ago, and maybe one what you're saying about the 4 solutions could be. It's like so I won't give the names because I think it's irrelevant, but I think the idea here is I think hope comes from knowing God's heart is for justice. Hoping and praying and calling out for justice is not mutually exclusive from having hope in Christ. We can care about people's eternal situation as well as their current situation. And it's hard to convince someone we care about their eternal situation if we say nothing about their current situation, their hurt, experience, and history and anguish. And maybe the idea behind that is like as a church or as an evangelical church in general, we could be afraid to fall into what we call the social gospel. But there is a social justice that is not the social gospel. Like you can have, it's not either or, you can have both and. So that's what you were saying. You can deeply care about the racism issue, but also bring people to Christ. I think it's a very deep comment in a way. So I don't know if you guys want to say something about that, but and there is others, interesting, I think, commentaries maybe. Yeah.
So, just my heart about it is, and this rule is like a rule that I've like placed on myself. I hate talking about an issue without also talking about a solution to it, And you, of course, like this, problem is like much bigger than me. It's much bigger than my experience. I don't have all the answers, but it's just like deep in my heart. I'd like, like I just keep saying it. I just feel like there's a lot of voices that say that like you are nothing, like you have no meaning. There's no end in sight. And the church, like this has to be our message.
Yes.
This has to be, and what's actually great about it. It speaks to the need that each person has. And not speaking and saying that, this issue of race is a lesser issue because it's not, but it makes it important to know that each person has a need, and it's okay if I can speak out like against something that is unjust, and just seek God for it as So, that's just my opinion, that I hate to talk about a problem without also talking about a solution for it. And I could be completely wrong, and I don't have all the answers. But, yeah, that's just my thought on it.
I think this church does a great job of ministering to people's social needs in our community. We do a lot. I see a lot of people in the community who come to our church for help for various reasons, whether it's food. I've been here when a guy and a girl just came in and said, our life is a wreck. We need to talk to a pastor. So I sat with them in the prayer room for an hour and a half, and they narrated their entire story. That happens often. It's happened to me maybe since I've been on staff 9 times. Just random people say, that's a church, I'm going there. I used to think, why don't we have walls around our church? Why don't we have a gate for some more security? It doesn't make sense. But then I realized in one respect, I get that. Without the walls, it's like we're inviting them in, and they feel comfortable coming in, because there isn't a gate and a guard that says I can't come in. So they come. It's a risk, but I see that they come. And I think this is another area of social ministry that we can have towards people. As I said before, I said this is an opportunity for us to grow in how to minister. But I think you tend to minister toward things that you see or you understand. And if there's something that you don't understand and you don't see, you don't address it. Mm-hmm. And that's also true in our own hearts. I mean, there have been issues. We have problems with people because of our own insecurities. And that in and of itself breeds limitations to our ministry to other people. Maybe someone of color did something to you before, and you carry that filter in your mind, so you have a presupposition bias toward them. Or maybe you grew up a certain way, or your background was different. And maybe it's not overt, but the way you perceive them is different. I just think that it's interesting to me how many people come in this church as new visitors, how many people come here to our food banks, they come here for our counseling, they come here for everything, but they will not come as a member. What do you think is wrong with that? It's extremely obvious. They don't feel like this is home. They don't feel like this could be a home. In their interactions, they don't feel like when they interact with us that maybe they meet the wrong person, maybe the wrong thing happens, someone says the wrong thing. Some of that you can't control, but at the same time, maybe there's a reason. Maybe there's something there to that. There's no way we have this many people that come through our doors of color, and from my count, less than 150 African Americans in our church. In a church of almost 1,200 people, in a predominantly black community, in a predominantly black city. As much as we outreach, the church planner in me says that doesn't make sense. Unless this is somehow this is part of it. We ask ourselves the question. I think some of it's perception. You walk into a predominantly white church, you don't see anybody black anywhere in positions of authority or responsibility, and you say, okay, well, this is not our church, this is not for me. And that might be completely their fault and not our fault. They have they made judgments based on perception. And on the other hand, the other side of that is maybe the method and measure of our ministry feeds that. Indirectly, maybe we feed that idea that you're welcome to visit, but you're not really welcome to stay. It's possible. But as Julia said, hope. Hope is a forward mind. There's no hope behind us. Hope is forward thinking. But what feeds hope is dialogue, connection, inner engagement, consideration. These are words that are not really being used right now in the movement. These words are not being used. Right now, rage, anger, frustration, and violence. Wow, that's like a firecracker. It lights up pretty big in the moment, but in a year, what happens? Isn't that what happened in 2015 after Freddie Gray? Baltimore was an incendiary candle. The entire world had their eyes on Baltimore. And by 2018, the Black Lives Movement was gone. It was done. No one was talking about it anymore at all. Then it took an event like this, boom, okay, this is 2020. This event took Corona off the map. No one's talking about Corona. People are gathering groups of 100 and 200, and they don't even care about Corona. This has pushed Corona out. Let me get Corona. I'm going to protest. I'm going to get my looted TV and Corona, and I don't care. That's where everybody's at. So I would love to see what remains in 2021 and 2022. Change. And I firmly believe if the churches are not part of the process, there will be no lasting change because God will not be in it. They will be right about their cause, but not righteous because God is not a part of it.
So just to be honest, something that kind of bothers me is I want more black people singing in our church. And it's like a prayer of mine. It's kind of, and it's because that we are in Baltimore City, and it's like, why not? So, and at the same time, you can't actually fake it, as being black, I don't want someone to ask me to do something that I can't do, but they're asking me to do it because I'm black, But at the same time, it's just been something that I've been praying about. It's we need black music, gospel music, black people singing, and that's just been something on my heart. I have a question for Pastor Ronaldo. So when it comes to Black Lives Matter, can you tell me your thoughts on it?
I think I said a little bit of it earlier. The civil rights movement was born in the church.
Yes, sorry. Yes, you did.
And the mouthpiece for the frustration of blacks was the church. The church was the one that spoke out and complained, and the church was the one that organized the beginning of any kind of civil disobedience. It was the pastors that were at the forefront leading. And what the church did, being the mouthpiece, is it brought order. It brought principle. It brought God into the conversation. And we're not just saying it's wrong because it's socially wrong. We're saying it's wrong because God said it's wrong. It's a different argument. The Black Lives Movement, and that was more proactive. The Black Lives Movement is more reactive to the results of racism. Okay, blacks are disproportionately being arrested and gunned down. That's something wrong with that. It's not right. True. So your response is going to be anger and violence, and reacting out. That's a voice, but it's not the right voice. It's not a lasting voice. And I think that's why every time they've tried to organize, they don't organize well. They have multiple leaders. They all have private agendas. There's even Muslims involved in their leadership. It's scattered. You have this one wants to be the leader, that one wants to be the leader, and since they have no leaders, they have no platform. They have varied principles. Some of them well thought out, but mostly philosophical as well as direct. And then what ends up happening is, okay, it's great, it's nice, thank you for your portion, and we're moving on. Because there's no substance to it. It just kind of peters out. And then the next time something happens, they can organize a march. Anybody can do that. They can organize rage, they can make up chants, they can make up statements, rah, rah, yeah, and we're angry, and get a lot of belligerent people to join you. Because any fool will join a riot. But the Bible called them base and lewd fellows. They just join right in. They get involved, and okay, and some of this stuff is shocking. A guy walking out with a TV, what does that have to do with black men being disproportionately killed? One lady, there's a picture float, she's walking out of a pastry store with a full cheesecake. How does that even remotely apply to the Black Lives Movement? And the look on her face is like, I'm going to finish this pie in the car. So where in the world does that actually apply to the movement? You gotta be, when you see that, no one takes you seriously.
No, like I actually saw a guy, he actually walked out with 2 bottles of Sprite, and he was just as happy as he could be. And I'm like,
got my reparations, 2 bottles of Sprite. That's my reparations
Sprite,
right there.
Man, not. I don't want to make light of looting because I don't support it or rioting, but I'm like, Sprite, you could have came out with something better than that. No, but I do think when it comes to riots, of course we don't support that, and I think it even hurts people who do want to protest peacefully, and I support that completely. That's our right to do it. I feel like it does have an effect on people, and really it makes our leaders actually see what the people want. I feel like the country can forget especially some of our leaders, like, it's about, like the heart of the people. And it's, like it's not about power, from, like a select few, really. So, yeah, it's just important to go forward in a way, like you said, with Black, Lives Matter. Like the question that I would want to ask is like, can we agree on like a goal? Like is there a goal? Like what is it exactly? That goal. Like I'm not saying you. Like I'm talking about like the whole entire movement. The for the whole group.
Yeah, like if you go down into Baltimore and you just look around, and those lives matter. They matter. So Gary Grunwald or any of us, you guys, like if you care about them, you're at the school. It's not a political statement. It's in my heart that Black lives matter. Like we're doing something. That's the issue. That's like a solution to a very present problem. That young man is 13 years old and he doesn't have his dad, and he doesn't have anybody to look up to, and maybe he's got a NFL football hero, Ray Lewis. So we need Ray Lewis to be in Baltimore to say something to all the kids and hang out and be here and have a camp. Or if he can't do it, then I can do it, or you could do it, because Black Lives Matter. Like it shouldn't be a thing that comes and goes with, a social statement in the time of a crisis. It should be everyday living that these lives matter, because they do. They matter to God. And what are you doing about it? Well, we're aborting the babies. That's a Black life, and it matters. 13-year-old kid without a dad, his life matters, right? So, I mean, I just want to get beyond, like you're saying, like, what's the end game? What are we doing about it? What's the solution? What do we do? You know what I mean? And the politicizing of the racial issues, it's like, okay, whatever people are saying, this isn't right and this isn't fair and so on. There's a place, I understand that. But for us, it's like, where are we living every day? But we are caring about the souls of people. And we would like a young man to become a pastor, or a young man to have a dad, or a young lady to be helped. What I mean? I'm just saying.
I think too, this is where the church has been over the years. I will go to the ghetto and I will minister to the Black child in the ghetto, but I don't want them in my church. That's a denominational mindset of a lot of churches. Okay, we do an outreach in the summer. We do Vacation Bible School with the Black kids. It's great. It's wonderful. It works. We went to their place. We ministered to them. Thank you very much. But what about the Blacks that are in your church, or the Blacks that come to your church? Am I winning them? Am I ministering to them? Am I reaching out to them? Because sometimes you get so outreach-oriented that in reach, that's why you're not retaining any of them. I would love to go to their house and minister to them, and I've done it, and I'll do it again this summer. But I also want them in the house. I want to win the ones that are in the house, because I know that they need more than just an outreach. They need a spiritual home with a pastor, with a body of Christ that they can grow up into. And then you have the pastors. The reason why we're not really developing a lot of Black pastors in our church is we're not winning the Blacks that are coming into our church to begin with. We're reaching out to them where they are. That's great. It's wonderful. We're winning them, leading them to Christ, investing in them. We know them. We go visit them. Okay, great. Now they're here. I've seen people get handed off, the great handoff. Hey, this is Tommy, he works with me. It's a person of color, he works with me. Tommy, this is Julius. Julius, talk to him. Now just walk off, and you'll do great with him. And they get orphanated in the body of Christ, and then they don't stay because Julius is nervous because he doesn't know the person, and then Tommy's nervous because he doesn't know Julius, and the person that brought him in the church is somewhere in a building that holds 1,000 people. I guess what I'm saying is progress.
Yeah, but I feel that that's a strategy issue.
Fair
Like it's a strategy issue. It's not a racial thing. It's more like in the city, let's say they come by buses, like, but if in the city we have a church in the city in their community, and you have a black pastor and you have the people in the program, there are empty churches in the city. It seems to me that the strategy would be to have 100 Greater Grace churches in the city of Baltimore, in every neighborhood, everywhere, with the pastors that are trained to be like you guys, what you're doing, and to do that. Because this facility, it's just, this is what it is. And if it doesn't meet the need, I mean, that's very possible, but we have the Bible College. We have different programs, but people don't stick to it maybe because they need small groups. Like small groups work really well, to learn their names, to have a program. That's what I feel for strategy at Baltimore City. I feel like that, It doesn't mean everybody is welcome, but what we have here. We have our limitations, We're working day and night. This facility is working and serving like hundreds of people, all the time, the day school and so on, But it isn't a black and white issue. It's more, this is what we have and people are welcome. I mean, I feel that way because but it doesn't mean that we're able to meet everybody's need. How many white people come in here and never come back? How many, whatever you have numbers wise. I'm not I don't want to sound defensive, but I'm just saying for the discussion, you can easily say that the good news is that we have these people that are here, and they are growing and changing and learning. And if this is their home, that's like awesome. But if it isn't, then they need to find a place. And that's maybe the question, like, where can they find a place, And then there's like New Psalmist, New Psalmist Baptist Church in different ones. There's Mount Pleasant. There are like thousands of people that are going to churches, which we can be thankful for. And what are they teaching their people, What is happening in the black churches and what is being said there regarding these issues too, right?
I think I said in the beginning that not just the white churches, none of the churches are saying anything right now in the middle of this current situation. None of them. The black churches have been quiet. The white churches have been quiet. The church has been quiet. The trending statement on social media is, where are the churches? And that was the point I was making in the beginning, is that we need to have a voice in this because we're the only ones that are going to inject God into this, the church. And I don't just mean Christians, but I mean the established church, because people in the church will follow the desire of the church. What the church prioritizes as important, its people follow. If the church does not prioritize something as important, it wouldn't be followed. Case in point, this very subject tonight is important because our church has decided that it's important. But if our church didn't decide it wasn't important, we wouldn't be having this conversation. So my point is, the church has got to have a voice. I spoke to 4 black pastors this week on the very same, are we doing anything? Are we saying anything? And it was, Pastor Ronaldo, we'll get back to you. There's a Zoom meeting. We'll talk. I said, okay, well, let's get beyond Zoom. let's put feet to this. If this is a problem and you have a position, your people will follow you. But put your feet to it. I think the third point I mentioned was about participating in whatever it is. And I'm not by any means indicting the church or indicting this church. I just see a situation that the church should be involved in. And it grieves me that we're not.
Yeah, I think like Martin Luther King Jr. and his philosophy, his approach, I think it's amazing. I love that guy. I mean, I love his message, his courage, his vision, and what he did was amazing. And it happened in the church because he was a believer. You know, he was a believer, and he followed through. I mean, it was beautiful. I mean, I'm sure he had his there's strengths and weaknesses, and I'm sure, you know, I realize that, but I'm trying to say that I agree with you. I think the Black Lives Matter group, you know, that I think the statement Black Lives Matter is a very good one. You know, that's a very good statement, and I like it. But like what it becomes, what it starts to be recognized as is not as good as what that statement is. You know, Black Lives Matter is like a huge, awesome statement. But then when it looks like, you know, is filled with people that, or not filled with people, but there are people there that are, you know, it doesn't seem like they're, like you said earlier, the principle. You know, where's the godliness, you know, the principle, you know. Then that's like for any organization, like you're going to attract all kinds of people and they can misrepresent the intention of the organization. Which didn't happen with Martin Luther King because he had a principle of like operating, we want to make a statement, but we're not going to do any violence. You know, we would be playing into the devil's hands if we do violence. So we got to do civil disobedience, and we're going to have to take the hit, but we will overcome, we will persevere with our patience, and we will be abused, but we will make a statement that will be louder than us being violent people, which he succeeded in doing. Yeah.
I think that one of the reasons why the churches are quiet is they're still shell-shocked from what happened in 2015 with Freddie Gray.
Yeah.
I also think they're overwhelmed by Corona. I also think that, again, race is most likely one of the top 5 most uncomfortable subjects in the Christian church. So no one wants to touch that with a 10-foot pole.
You know, let's finish our wrap, but just say this. My feeling on it, because, and you have lived in other countries, you know, like how many, 3 or 4 or something? Okay, 3 or 4 different countries. When you live in a foreign country, like you in a way, I'm invited, the Hungarian government is allowing me to live in Hungary. So I go in and I am a guest. I am welcomed into Hungary. And then they speak Hungarian language, and they are Hungarians, and they eat Hungarian bread. And I eat that Hungarian bread also, and they allow me to be there. So wherever, you know, when you live like this for a number of years, and then you don't see any difference between you and Hungarians because of the spirit, and you're in a Hungarian church, you have a Hungarian, the whole thing, and you're in the spirit. Now, is there some issue there between you and the Hungarians? No, because we are in the body. So I feel the same thing about the racial things. Like, I am here, and I'm subject to, I'm underneath, I am with God, but I'm here to serve. I'm here to be loving. I'm here to whoever they are, whoever those people are, if they are Finnish or Russian or Hungarian or whatever they are. So this mentality is easy for us because like you've grown in the Spirit and you've walked in the faith and you're a servant. So we have a church that is multicultural, but like, what do I think? I don't know. It's just normal to me. It's like absolutely normal. I have no idea of like how people could think of it any other way, you know? So now I'm a black pastor. I have a black church, and white people are welcome into the church. It doesn't matter to me. White people are in the church or they're not in the church. It doesn't matter because we're spiritual. So that black pastor also has a ministry, and his ministry is the same thing. It's a ministry of life. It's a ministry in the Spirit. So, like, it seems to me that that in the city of Baltimore and anywhere where we have these mixed communities, that it would be very easy for there to be a church, a black church, which is a mix of people, as well as having a white church, which is a mix of people. It doesn't make sense to me that there would be just all black people or all white people. It doesn't make sense to me. I don't understand that. I mean, I just got to. I mean, I think you would agree, but I don't know why that is. Like, why is that? I don't know. I guess it's just the community you grew up in, the family you grew up in. You stay in the same, you know. But I think on a spiritual level, there isn't any difference between people, you know. I'm sorry, I can't do it, Adam. Yeah, well, afterwards.
Yeah,
Okay, go
we
ahead.
had the same issue when Pastor Shivita was saying people were a bit frustrated that we couldn't hear what he had to say. But yeah, there is a lot of comments, but I think didn't interrupt. The conversation was really good. So
Yeah.
but there is encouraging comments and thoughts that I bring about about the idea of integration and just so I think if we would stop that, we would be there for another long time. But I think there's very interesting comment. Just like for us as Christians to just think about, what can we, of course, like have the humble attitude of being ready to learn and see what God can, how God can use us, to be a part of the solution and a part of the problem, so. Yeah. Amen.
Okay. Good.
Thank you, Pastor.
We're done. Thank you.
Yes,
Thank
I just
you.
want to thank you for tonight, though. Like, again, like I thought it was huge. That thought that you actually shared was just amazing, and I am so proud to be here in this church. And just actually serving. Like alongside these great people that we serve next to. So yeah, that's it.
Great. Thank you. Amen. Thank you.